Hello and welcome to an acysecurities market update. My name is Alistair Schultz and I'm going to be your host through today's trading journey. Now on Mondays we usually have a little bit of a quieter market until at least the open of the European session, so I don't have a lot to update you on in terms of what's gone on throughout today's trading day during the Sydney and the Asian session. The only thing that's really of note is that there has been further talk about the potential of doing a stop on stock markets in the ASX. That hasn't gone through yet. We're unlikely to see further action on that today, but it is something to keep in mind, especially if you do have positions in any market on the ASX. So be wary of that. Now, what I have got for the rest of you is a couple of trade updates. So the very first one that I'm showing you here now is of my $CAD position that I took earlier this morning. Ideally, I would have liked to have been in this position on Friday night. I am seeing a double top pattern that is occurring, and it has taken some time to play out. But when these patterns get much larger, like when I look for them, I'm looking for them on weekly, on sort of longer term time frames and picking out a pattern over a couple of days, then I usually expect the result to take a couple of days as well. So if you're interested in it, then feel free to zoom in on the screen now and have a look. It is a late entry, and for this reason I have gone in a little bit softer than I usually would, but I'm still hoping it will turn out to be quite a productive trade. Now the next one to have a look at that I've got on my screen here is of my position on the Euro Pound. Now I've been holding this position for a little bit over a week, and I have still got anticipation for it to be coming down. I am sitting currently profitable on it by a couple of $1,000s, and I have some very big stop losses. Now this is my usual trading style, especially when it comes to much longer term things. Naturally, with the environment that we're in now, it restricts on your ability to do long term positions. So at the moment I did have it with a 600 pip stop, but I have moved it down to the most nearest swing high that I feel comfortable leaving it at. So now my target is still about another 400 pip away. It's about 220 pip up now, but I am expecting it to go a little bit further. But from this point on, it's all just profit. So at any point in time, I may decide to cut it off. Feel free to check it out. And I've got one more chart for you to have a look at, which is of oil. Now, WTI oil here is the price that we can see up to current date, which shows us all the way back to 2004 on this chart. However, I've been looking at oil prices over a much greater time frame, looking over the last 70 years on what the lowest prices that we've ever seen for WTI oil is. So back in the early 70s, we saw prices hit $17.69. And the reason I'm sort of talking about this is, where might I consider buying oil? And why might I start buying that oil? Well, right now we're seeing it has hit $20 a barrel a few times before, just as back in the 60s it hit about, in the 80s it hit about $108 a barrel back then too. So we do have both sides working at play here. There are a couple of resistance points to consider. Now I'm marking the $17.69 range as somewhere of interest. Now if it gets close to that, I will probably consider start buying into a position, and on the way, if it does turn around at that point and continue to go back up, then I will obviously continue buying on the way up, sort of doing the reverse and pyramiding my entries, or scaling in, if you will. So that's where I've got my targets. Now right now oil is sitting at about $20 a barrel. It's really not that far for it to move. The $3, it does that on a daily basis. So if we see it fall below that, my next anticipations would be about $17.60, $16.70, and from there I will be I'll be looking for a very likely reversal to occur. Now if it does, fantastic. That's from the technical perspective though. So what are the other things I'm going to take into account when it comes to that? Well, the next pieces of information I'm going to seriously consider is what's going on with OPEC, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and the US, because I am certain that at some stage, if it drops much further than this, and even if it stays at this price for a prolonged period of time, then someone is going to reach out to the other and they're going to want to have some talks to talk about getting price back up. So when it gets this sort of low, I have read a couple of other things about it possibly going into a negative scenario, in which case the idea behind it, or the principle, is that they have so much oil and too much oil, they don't know where to store it. So they end up giving away oil or paying you to take it off their hands. So that is something to keep in mind. Obviously, the technicals and the fundamentals need to work together when it comes to oil and most other things, or at least that's the way I like to look at things. So keep in mind on both of those factors. It's probably something to be aware of at the very least moving ahead, especially if you're going to trade oil, then you need to know these sort of things. Now, for your news that you've got ahead of the next sort of 12 hours or so from now, what I've seen on here, we've got the Swiss Economic Barometer. We also have German CPI, Spanish CPI, which I mentioned this morning that they would be areas of interest because naturally CPI is always something to consider. UK mortgage approvals. Now, I can't see the UK having good results on these right now, especially with the current state of lockdowns that they actually have. So that is also going to be something that you might want to keep an eye on. I don't think we're going to see much effect of that on price because it's kind of one of those things that it's like, well, that's expected. So the only other thing in there would be at 1 a.m. we have US home sales, so that could potentially have an impact, but it's hard to really say. Again, it's a very similar sort of scenario to the UK. We are seeing massive amounts of lockdowns. It's hard to imagine a lot of people are wanting to start buying houses and go to auctions with all the COVID-19 going on. But that's all I have for you today. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email at talk2al@acy.com. And of course, like and subscribe to the video so you can get more great content from us in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.